You are watching or listening to Purham and Associates. For more information, go to rpurham.com or follow me on all social media platforms and subscribe at RPURHAM. Thanks. See you over there. Hey, I hope y'all had a fantastic week so far. You know, it is Friday, and of course, on Fridays, this is also the time that we take to thank our men and women who are serving our nation around the world, sacrificing and committing their time, their freedom, and protecting our freedom, our Constitution, our way of life. We want to thank you. We salute you, and we wish you a safe journey back home to your friends, families, and loved ones, wherever they may be. Folks, we got a very special guest with us today, and he's a returning guest and a very astute gentleman. He's doing a lot of great work out there, and we're going to get into some of that today. We have none other than Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni. He is spanning a 40-year career as a practicing clinical pharmacist. He is an advocate for better health services and resources to enhance the health of boys and men. He has held faculty appointments at both Columbia University and Belmont University, and has authored over 70 peer-reviewed and general media articles in healthcare and health policy. Men's Health Network is a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to reach men, boys, and their families where they live, work, play, and pray with health awareness and disease prevention messages and tools, screening programs, educational materials, advocacy opportunities, and patient navigation. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the some and presenting the others, Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me back on the program.
Absolutely. I thank you for taking the time to come back. Tell us what have you been up to the last, I think it was like 6 months since you've been on.
I've been right here in sunny and ridiculously humid Central Florida, just working on a lot of projects in the area of men's health, and it's always an uphill battle. Unfortunately, men still suffer from 9 out of the 10 leading causes of death. They have a higher mortality rate and all of those, and we're still looking at a longevity gap between men and women of almost 5.5 years. So there's a lot of work to do. So I've been out being a good apostle for the notion that men need to take responsibility for their own health, and they need the help of their families and their communities to do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny you're mentioning longevity between men and women, because just last week I went back home to Chicago to visit my family and whatnot. Haven't been home in 7 years, but anyways, the women in the family, especially on the older side, they outlived the men by over 10 years. Some like as long as 30 years, and we was kind of like joking amongst ourselves, like, why is it that the women are outliving the guys? What was going on back then that was going on? And it was kind of like, well, yeah, think about it. Back then, 70s, 60s, 50s, the men were working much harder than the women were. So they induced more stress and everything else, and subsequently that caught up to them. But I want to ask you, in the long run of all of that, can men find ways to circumvent dying before their spouse and dying on par with their spouse? I guess will be the question. What can we do to be more, I guess you say, around longer?
Well, they have to take a page out of the women's health playbook, I think, and that is they have to take, as I mentioned earlier, personal responsibility for their own health and wellness. From early on, boys are not taught to look at their own health as their responsibility, and they're actually we've just taken a look, or we took a look in the past about advertising about health and health messages. Ponderance, most of all the health awareness, health management advertising in this country is targeted to women, and that's good. I mean, these are ways to learn things, but also the men are not really part of the health promotion, health advertising. A lot of the advocacy work is done by women on behalf of women. There's even a Congressional Men's Health Caucus out there, which is advocating for men, but it has not been particularly effective in moving legislation thus far, although they keep trying through the Congress to support overarching policies that would support men. So, I think there's a mix of there isn't a policy will to help men lead better, longer, more healthy lives, and the guys are not taught from an early age that their health is their responsibility.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I am surprised to learn that Congress is doing little to nothing about helping advocate for that, considering that over half of the members of Congress are males. You'd think they would be on board with that. But hey, this is the
Well,
world we're in, I
just to
guess.
give you a concrete example of
Yeah.
that, HHS is undergoing an overhaul of all of their activities and funding, and I think it's creating what some characterize as chaos. But cleaning house sometimes is chaotic, as anybody who's done spring cleaning knows. But at the end of the day, the house looks a lot better. One of the things that Men's Health Network is urging is as HHS cleans house, they look at the structure of support for women and men within the HHS environment. There are at least 6 offices of women's health fully funded in HHS. They look at policy, they coordinate healthcare services, they look at legislation, they look at support at the state level, at the federal level, but there are 0 men's health offices within HHS. So we're not saying, add more money in, because I know we're in the business of cutting back, but take a look at reallocating resources so at the very least there's some equity for men's health at the federal level. And we can see that in so many things. I think there are strides being made. The presidential fitness test is one of them. Some of the other things that are being done to emphasize personal responsibility are good. But I think,
Hmm.
it's unfortunate that the federal government also does not pay an awful lot of attention to women,
Yeah.
I mean, to men.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. That is kind of concerning, and perhaps with Bobby Kennedy Jr. up in there now, maybe he will shift some focus to that as well. Given that he's I'm not gonna say a health nut, but he's kind of along that spectrum of working out a lot and eating right and all that good stuff. So he might bring it in there. You just mentioned the president's fitness test. I'm glad you brought that up because they're trying to bring that back, and health experts and school leaders, they're thrilled about it. And then I'm looking at it from a standpoint of how does this affect kids going forward in terms of the status of where they're at right now in life. They're a lot of kids are lazy. They don't want to go outside and play. They don't want to do much of anything. And then now all of a sudden they're being forced to have to go outside and play and what have you. And this program was around 60 years ago and it was ended in 2012 under Obama. I want to get your thoughts on what will be the impacts to this right now.
Well, these presidential focuses, in one form or another, have been around since about 1956, when
Hmm.
President Eisenhower, former General Eisenhower, was the president and initiated them. And the focus was to set up national benchmarking standards for what physical fitness looks like in America. And as always, these things need to be revised. Standards were set. Schools were asked to run programs where they would measure the physical fitness and readiness of the school. Most folks who are listening to this probably remember, having to stretch or run or do pull-ups or chin-ups or something. Some people loved it, some people didn't like it, but it at least established a benchmark, a standard. Around 2012, as you and this whole process of presidential endorsement of physical health in the United States moved forward from Eisenhower, but still, what we saw and still see is that 40% of Americans are obese. 60% of Americans are overweight, and this is the stunning thing, about 20% of children between 2 and 19 years of age are overweight, and 6% are obese. And that's unfortunately grown dramatically over the decades. So, the test is one thing, but having a test in arithmetic and knowing your score, your grade in an arithmetic test doesn't make you a great mathematician unless you take personal responsibility to learn how to do mathematics. So the same holds true for the physical fitness test. It's a benchmark, it's a mark, it's an awareness sort of thing. But still, folks, their families need to take responsibility for knowing how to be physically fit and nutritionally fit.
Mm. You're absolutely right. It is incumbent upon us to take personal responsibility in our health. Ultimately, it's well and good that you send your kid off to school and they have recess and they have a gym class as part of their daily curriculum. But ultimately, when they come back home, they're still your responsibility to ensure that they are maintaining a good sense of weight to them, a good sense of overall health and everything else, and we just don't see that or hear about that anymore. Like I said, going back to when I was in Chicago last week, and I went to go visit some of my old schools. I remember if I was looking at the playgrounds, I was like, I remember we had to come out in the middle of the day, no matter what the weather was, and we had to go out there and play, do something. I remember that.
That's right.
It was just like, man, it's a blizzard. You see that tornado cloud? It's like, y'all be right. Go out there and play. We'll come in when the cars start flipping over. It's just like, okay. So it just, our society has just gotten away from that. You don't hear about kids going out to play during
Yes.
school and stuff anymore. You don't hear that kind of stuff. And so you're right that it does contribute to the kids, even adults, being obese and overweight and having poor health and out of shape for the most part. Somebody trying to run down the street, nowadays, especially myself. I know I didn't fell out of that window. After I retired, I said I'm not working out ever again, and I kind of held true to that. Actually, going on 5 years now. So we have to get back to the basics of those kind of things. But for these kids, I want to ask you, Doc, for these kids that do you see that it would be kind of like a shell shock for them that one day they're not having to go to PE, not having to work out, not having to do anything, and then all of a sudden they're thrown into hey, you got to bench 250 pounds tomorrow, type of thing. Do you see a shell shock happening in that regard?
Well, I don't, as with any socioculturally steeped sort of thing, this is, moves the medical issue into a sociocultural issue and a parenting issue, and that makes it very, very complicated. But I think, it's the overarching point, and you make a very, very important point here that's lost on fun. One is exercise doesn't need to be done at the gym or as an exercise regime. Exercise should be fun. If you think about how we lived in the 50s, where we certainly had overweight people and obese people, but not to the extent we have now, and certainly not in kids. If we look at the way our lifestyles were in the 50s in terms of physical exercise throughout the day, it's very different. So, for example, in the 50s, people would go to the supermarket, they would walk around the supermarket, they would carry their groceries to the car, they would bring them home. Mom would prepare food at home with stuff she knew what was going in there, and made it well. But now we call up or we order online, and food is delivered to your door. And we would walk to school. I walked uphill in the snow both ways every day. In New York to get to school. We would work to houses of worship. We would walk to the playground, and you're right. We would walk to a playground that was full of monkey bars and slides and swings and sand pits and tilt-a-whirl things. Now, a playground, if it doesn't have a covered mat, and certain things have been taken away because they're considered too dangerous for Johnny and Jane to climb on or do, our way of living has changed dramatically in terms of the, if you will, the secret exercise that we did as part of our everyday lives. When you compare the 30s, 40s, 50s to the quarter mark of the 21st century. So it's very different. We need to get back to doing those sorts of things. In terms of nutrition also, I'm not completely against fast food. I mean, it's a convenience sort of thing, and that's the way we always approached it when I was raising our 5 kids. But and now, unfortunately, ultra-processed foods, fast foods have become the daily consumption as opposed to the weekly or monthly treat, or the exception when you were running really, really late from soccer practice or something else, physical that the kids were doing at school, or you had a long day at the office. And I think we need to move back to the point where households, whether they have kids in it or not, take control and take ownership of their own nutrition. You'll have better nutrition.
I agree. I agree 100% there. And as soon as you just said about the fast food and convenience, I got kind of like started to feel like self-conscious about it because I'm guilty of it. I am guilty of it. I live a very busy life, and there's days it's just my wife and I in the house, and she works as well, and so there's days that we would have time to cook dinner or lunch or whatever the case may be, even breakfast. But we're like, nah, let's go to McDonald's and get breakfast, or no, let's run down the street and get, some,
It is a lot of work. That's true.
You spend more time and money going to retrieve these things, even to have it delivered. You're still waiting around. By the time you get all of that, you could have had already cooked a very healthy meal. It only takes 20 minutes tops, depending on what you're cooking. And you go from there. You save yourself some money and you save yourself some calories. But we don't do that because we are conditioned to want things here and now, and I struggle with that.
I'm sympathetic. I mean, we have a lot of two parent working homes. It's almost a necessity for so many. But there are other ways. There are workarounds. We have always had a huge freezer. And on weekends, being a good Sicilian guy that I am, I would make a big old pot of spaghetti at home, roasts at home, and we would have those frozen for the week, and then we'd have some meat. And I still carry that on now. So I cook on the weekends when I'm not running around doing stuff. It was fun. It was pleasurable, and it's great. So I mean, there are always workarounds, but I am sympathetic to the time crunch. Unfortunately, the other thing I call to attention is that folks say, "Well, okay, I get it. Some of the processed food is McDonald's or hamburgers and chain restaurants, things like that. It may not be the healthiest or the best, so I'll just pick up a prepared dinner at the supermarket." But if you look at the label on those prepared dinners, these are really foodstuffs that have been manufactured into a portion of a meal. When you look at the amount of preservatives, dyes, flavor enhancers, surfactants to keep things flowing so that they freeze properly and defrost properly, if that's what they are. Even that bag of shredded mozzarella you get on the shelf that I use all the time in my lasagna, when I do make lasagna, it's got preservatives, flow agents, flavor enhancers in it. So it's very hard to find pure food. You're never going to cut out these things completely, but you do have to moderate them. But again, it's a strategy so that when you're 90, you can feel as good as you did when you're 19, and it's work.
That's you're you're absolutely right about that, Doc. And I'm 45, and I already feel like I'm 90. So I hate to get to 90 and see what I'll be feeling like then. But I want to
Well, I'm planning on being there. I'll let you know.
oh yeah, please do, please do. I look. God bless you. I hope you get there because me, I'm like, oh no, the way I'm feeling right now. Woo. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of where we at now with children, even young adults, with the transgender movements happening uh, within school systems and everything else, and then you got the men playing in women's sports and all that. I'm thinking about the physical fitness test. It just popped in my head just now. How will that translate? Into that domain to what's going on currently with that. Do you see a issue where you have transgender kids that can't compete or can't do anything, or you have yeah within the fitness test.
Yeah, and that extends to a lot of parts of society. I was talking with another host who was a former police officer, and he saw a distinct difference in the training for of male and female police officers and the standards that my son's a former Marine who still actually is serving his comrades there in social service work in for the Marines,
Mm,
uh, and it is a cultural phenomena. But we can't let the smaller number of individuals who have gender dysphoria, and it's a real thing. For sure, it's a real thing, but it's not as extensive as it's been portrayed, I believe, and I find it difficult to understand a kid who is still looking for trying to decide whether they're going to be a ballet dancer or a firefighter. Can decide they're going to be female or male at the age of 5? But that's another discussion.
right.
But having one of the things that the change of President Obama did with the physical fitness test and the President's Council on Physical Fitness was to create individual goals for folks. But unfortunately, it turned out to be more individualized along the lines of body positivity or trophy from participation trophies, rather than bring yourself against a normative standard or a standard of excellence. And of course, you can measure yourself, and these are personal things. The federal government isn't sending health expert agents into the homes to say, okay, Jane, Johnny, or they, or she, or he, or them, you've got to meet this. This is a self motivating thing. So
Right.
pick a standard you want to address
Accomplish. Hmm.
and then do it. Set that goal. Americans are very goal oriented and
Right.
psychologically having that goal. So however you identify by gender, or so pick a goal and then shoot for it, and then you've got to develop the discipline to go for it.
Good deal. And you're right. We are goal oriented, goal minded people in this
Very.
society, and I like the approach of making it an individual thing, making it versus the class thing or a group thing or what have you. It's an individual like, hey, what do you want to achieve out of this? Where do you want to go? And that was like that,
Yeah,
coming up
and
in the
it,
military. Hmm. Yep. And so I see that in like I was saying, I see it kind of like being a problem in that domain, because identity crisis with kids these days is very, very much a prevalent problem. Then you have, the gender dysphoria that's going on, which could be eradicated. If you put it back into the DSM as a mental illness, then a lot of people are going to take pause about being labeled as mentally ill, and they're going to put on that facade that they're normal, and they're going to psych themselves up long enough to believe that they're normal, that they actually become normal people. And we seen studies of that happening, and it used to be that way back in the 90s and the 2000s before we got rid of that. Even in the military, it was like, that was not a thing. It was if you're coming in here saying that you're the opposite sex, you're getting chaptered out of the military, or you're, getting discharged and whatnot. So people didn't, tread down that path unless they wanted to intentionally get kicked out of the military. Then they would do the, come to work in a dress and prance around in makeup, and it's like, okay, you're faking it. Get out that stuff and get back to work. And that was the end of it, And so, but now we allowed it, we let it go so far that the course correction is going to take probably double the time to get there than what we normally would expect. And I want to get your thoughts on that, Doctor.
Well, that you still have a need to stay fit. I mean, to my way of thinking, it doesn't really matter how you identify your personal gender or biologically. I mean, sex is sex, and I believe that's correct. Sex is sex. It's chromosomally mediated. It's not a arbitrary decision made at birth. It is made by genetic encoding, just like genetic encoding decides whether I'm going to be bald or not. It is. But however you identify gender, it doesn't preclude the fact that you can still pick a standard, a benchmark, and then follow it and eat well and exercise regularly, fun exercise. Ballroom dancing is a great exercise. Jazz, I mean, these are all wonderful things you can do that make exercise fun rather than a regimented chore. So, in the context of health, personal fitness, personal emotional health, there's a lot to be said there for individualizing it. And I think that also goes to how physical education is taught in schools. Unfortunately, when you have a standardized test, some individuals are going to feel, left out or feel bad that they can't do that 50-yard run the way Sally did it or the way Johnny does, jumping jacks. But that matters. What matters there is how educators, teachers are trained in administering physical education, how parents have an understanding of how to deal with a kid who's never going to run 50 yards on the benchmark like I couldn't. It just wasn't in the cards for me ever. So, I think there's also an education on the other side of the coin, the individuals who are mentoring younger folks and mentoring them and motivating themselves to learn more about positive motivation as opposed to punitive motivation.
Yeah, and that's very important, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That is a great distinction as well. Being the motivation factors versus punitive. Yeah, yes, that is very important, and I I had to learn how to distinguish the difference myself in my early sergeant days in the army. I would be quick to make folks do push-ups versus giving them more positive motivation to do the right thing. So I agree. You're absolutely right about that. But Doc, tell us what.
Yeah, and making it fun and incorporating all of this into your daily life takes away a lot of that stigma, a lot of everything else. Because you basically, when you go to the park or you play even pickleball, I don't quite understand pickleball, but I hear it's very popular. I'm not sure why, but whether you're playing pickleball as a 60-year-old or whether you're playing Pop Warner League football, physical activity should be a lot of fun. It shouldn't be a chore that you hate to do. You're not going to do it.
Yeah, that's true. You're absolutely right. And tell us what men's what's going on in Men's Health Network. What do y'all have coming up? Any projects? Any I guess you say initiatives coming up?
Well, we continue to work with the federal government to try and get some notice for more men within the structure of HHS, within the workings of HHS. We continue on addressing the issue of the longevity gap between men and women by doing programs such as yours, to talk with guys about how they need to be positive role models for their family. We also continuing now that the things are calming down with COVID and all. although it's still out there, I must say, COVID, we're coming up to respiratory infection season. We're doing more health screenings programs in faith-based organizations, and there's a tremendous amount of information about all the advocacy work, all the programmatic work, all the materials that we have that are educationally designed by men, for men, and thank you for mentioning it, healthymennetwork.org, www.healthymen, menshealthnetwork.org. We have plenty of information out there. menshealthnetwork.org.
Thank you. And Doc, any final thoughts, and where can people follow you and support you, sir?
Well, we appreciate folks like you giving us some airtime to reach audiences, because without this kind of support, it's very difficult to make a difference in lives. And for the parents out there, yeah, being a parent is really hard work. I have 5 grown kids, and I'm still parenting them, bless their hearts. But it's hard work, but at the end of the day, if you help guide them as role models for positive physical health, positive nutritional management, you'll reap the rewards many, many, many fold. So I know it sounds like a ministry sort of thing, but health is a ministry.
That is so true. You're right. Health is a ministry, and we have to look at it that way a lot of times. And I never thought of it that way. Yeah, you're right. Well, Doc, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to come back and be on with me today. Truly appreciate it, and I do hope that you get to 96 and beyond, and tell me how that feels when you come back in that Windows. Because yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get there. But Doc, be safe out there. God bless you, sir, and talk to you soon.
Anytime I can be a help to you and your audience, I'm more than happy to be on, representing Men's Health Network.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Have a good one. Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Salvatore Giorgianni. Listen, I joke and say, not making it to my 90s. I hope I do, actually, because I will be very curious to see what the world is like. I've seen so many changes over the last 4 decades that I've been here that, the next 5 would be very interesting to be a part of, and hey, you never know. But, we got cryogenics out there now, so, but no, but on a serious tip though, the President's fitness program, fitness test program would be something of marvel in the education system, because kids these days, I see kids, going, sit at the bus stop and whatnot, getting ready to ride the bus to school in the mornings and stuff like that. Some of them are like really big kids, like huge, like round, like chunky, not big kids, not like, oh, you're a tall kid for 13, no, I mean like huge, type of thing. And so that would probably help, them getting out of the classroom and getting into the schoolyard, getting into the gyms and working out and playing and doing stuff like that. I'm a proponent of, even having it to where, you could do your classwork, your coursework while you're working out and doing stuff, in the classroom even. Hey, you get a right answer, you get to eat a granola bar and do 10 push-ups. Stuff like that. I don't know. But folks, it's Friday, so I'm going to jump up out of here. I do have to get ready to go somewhere here shortly, and I was debating on whether or not I can squeeze in doing the show today or not. So, folks, I think I'll be here Monday. I think. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. I go with the wind these days. So, be safe out there. Y'all have a fantastic weekend, and don't do anything stupid, and I will see you when I see you. So, cha-cha. Take care. God bless. I hope you enjoyed today's program. You can follow, like, share, subscribe on Spotify, Substack, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and your news. And also, you can download Let the Truth Be Told app on your favorite streaming platforms, such as Fire Stick, Apple TV, and Roku. Take care. God bless.